Welcome everyone. This is the first of my relationship series, the first audio session. Every session I'll be joined by a different coach or expert in their own right with me. And today I'm very glad to have Christine Livingstone on the audio with me. Christine is an executive coach, she's a writer, she's a speaker. She's got a degree in psychology and she works a lot in the corporate world. But today, as the title gives away, we're going to be talking about relationships. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Ankush. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. In the preamble and the build up to the call, we're just having a conversation around how you do a lot of work in the corporate field, but you get sought out sometimes for the relationship side of things, and this is a passion of yours. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think we're having this conversation. As we said in our preamble, I do feel as if I'm kind of coming out of the closet a little. Relationship has always been a passion of mine. I suppose, we all have kind of like professional persona, don't we? We have a part of us that we carry into whatever work we chose at some point in our lives and make money from, or like to say we're part of. And executive and corporate work has for me been very core for years and years. But I think in the background I've always had an interest, a personal interest in relationship, because for many years I believed that was something that was going to elude me personally. I actually was married and divorced at one point, and I've been in a number of relationships that never went anywhere, and so I just had this belief about myself that that kind of romantic thing was just never going to be something I could crack, and I became really curious about it at actually going back about 10-15 years now, and did a lot of work to really understand how come I believed that about myself, in order that I kind of changed my belief and changed my perspective. And as I did so, actually I met the person that I've now spent the last 8-9 years with, and I'm very happy with. And interestingly, what's also happened over that period is that more and more people have sought me out, albeit I've never marketed myself as a relationship person, but to talk to about relationship stuff, a relationship breakdown, or a sense that they can't meet the right person, or all kind of things. And I very much enjoy relationship work. I really, really, I love it, actually.
Great, and I'm really grateful that you've taken the time out to join us on this interview today and talk a little bit about the work that you do. I mean, there are a number of ways we could go with this, but something that comes up for me is what really changed. You said that you had perhaps difficulties before, and now you've met someone. Was that coincidence? Was that just chance, or was there something that you feel changed in yourself or in your life that has brought that about?
Well, I mean, and obviously this preceded any of my work with the 3 principles, but I actually went and did some psychotherapy on it. I actually was in psychotherapy for a good number of years, and things came to a head for me when I had just like one particular thing happened with one guy I'd been really in love with, who just disappeared off the face of my earth unexpectedly, and it was just the end. It was just, I just kind of went to my therapist and said, that's it, I'm done having crappy relationships. I've really got to understand. And he asked me this brilliant question, which was, what is it about every person you've ever been in relationship with that was there from the beginning but you've never seen? And I had to really kind of think about it, but one of the things that really occurred to me was that the people I'd got involved with had never ever been committed to me. And of course, I could have made that about them. But then I kind of ultimately asked myself some questions about how committed I was to myself. And I kind of came to this realization that if I wanted to be in good relationship with another person, I had to be in good relationship with myself. You know, if I was looking for commitment from somebody else, I had to fundamentally commit to myself. So I then really asked myself what that would mean. And, you know, I'm a kind of great believer of the whole kind of principle of integrity, that, you know, you are your word. And, you know, here was me saying that I wanted commitment. And actually, when I reviewed my life and how I was behaving toward myself at that point, I was not acting in a committed way to myself. I wasn't particularly looking after my health, my well-being. And as soon as I started to kind of clean up my act about my relationship with myself, actually how I started to feel about myself in relationship shifted. So I stopped actually needing somebody else to make me okay or to confirm that I was of value, because increasingly I was giving that experience to myself. And therefore I kind of, when, you know, Steve, the guy I'm now with, appeared, it turned out I'd kind of known him for actually over a year at the point it was clear he was going to become a romantic partner. But it had just never occurred to me to need him. And what had happened was we developed this really beautiful friendship and a kind of really good feeling without there having to be this pressure to make it into an anything. And we both kind of came to this point of going, oh my God, you know, it's just... But I really went through quite a deliberate process of understanding how I was being in relation to myself. And that's what shifted it.
Thanks, that's really quite powerful, and I was reflecting on that in some of the conversations I have, either with clients or just people that I meet around relationship. And I think what I heard you point to is that, you know, so many, and I know I've done this in the past, looked to feel better through someone else. And actually what I heard was when you shifted to move the focus away from other people to make you feel a certain way, but actually focusing on yourself, that seemed to change everything.
It did. It shifted everything. Everything. And therefore, when a relationship appeared, it was kind of like the icing on the cake. It wasn't something that I needed. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't, there were no story about how it was or wasn't fulfilling me. It was simply something that was enriching my life. And that was really quite magical. In the beginning, I couldn't quite believe how powerful it was to have kind of created that sort of space.
That's I can feel the energy as you talk about that. Is there anything that you see now differently than you saw before, that you see in clients or people that work with you, that you'd perhaps love to get across to the listeners of this short audio, in terms of what they could take and perhaps implement in their life if they are looking to improve their romantic relationship?
Well, I think the point about stop looking for commitment outside and start actually first and foremost being committed to yourself, your own happiness, your own well-being, is kind of like step one, you know. Before you join any dating sites, before you go out and try and meet anybody, you know, it's really about looking after yourself and being committed to yourself. And I think thereafter, you know, as you start to meet people, there are a number of things. In a lot of my work, I come across both men and women who, for whatever reason, find it quite difficult to be with the person they're actually with. So they kind of invent an image of the person they imagine this other person to be, and they try to course correct them when they don't quite fit the image. So there's something for me about really taking time and understanding the person that you're beginning to create some kind of liaison with, you know, warts and all, and love the good with the bad, love everything about them, you know. And for me, actually, love isn't a feeling, it's an action, you know. It's a decision that you're kind of going to extend a part of yourself towards another person. And that means good and bad. It's not about, you know, liking this part of them that takes you out for dinner or buys you presents, and then not liking this other part of them that, you know, leaves their shirts on the floor or what have you. It's about knowing that's all of them, and love the part of them that leaves their shirt. You know, make a joke of it, make it funny, just see it as part of them. And then and then it's really, I think, about how you, it's about like some of what we learn in coaching. There's something about how can I serve the other, not what is this other person going to do for me, but how can I be fully present in this relationship? How can I keep turning up and keep serving this beautiful other person who has somehow coalesced in my life? Because that's, I think, when you make a really, really rich relationship. You know, it's not something that you've created out of mythology. It's something that's actually real and present and 3 or 4 dimensional. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I really love the word you used there, which was serve, and that's been something that's been really powerful for me, both within my coaching and also in my personal relationships, because what I hear differently from, and maybe this is just me, but what I hear differently for me in the word serve, it doesn't mean being nice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
For me, serving means doing what is best for the other person, and that could be getting uncomfortable. That could be telling them something that you want to tell them, but you're like, oh no, this might be, they might not like it, but you know it's in their best interests. And I found totally that when I switch my mindset to one of service, whether it is in coaching or outside of coaching, it always results in a better outcome.
Completely. It's fascinating. You know, I have some conversations with clients around this exact thing, and you know, they may say to me, well, I see this about my partner or that about my partner, and I say, well, have you told them? And they say, well, no, I can't. So I say, well, why not? Well, they might get pissed off with me, they might get really angry, they might leave me. I say, yeah, they might. But actually, don't you think it's the most loving thing you can do to be that honest and let them feel that's where you're coming from? You're coming from a place of loving them so much that you are going to risk upsetting them in order that they really hear something from you. And I think people find that quite tough. You know, they get so hooked into this. Oh, but what if they leave me? Well, if they do, that might be the right answer, you know. But yes, serving and loving are not necessarily soft options.
Yeah, and I love what you just said there, and for me it really touches on openness and vulnerability as well. And I find that the more open and vulnerable I become in all of my relationships, the better relationship, the better connection I have. and that totally leads into the serving, and I find is very connected, but is something that it can be quite difficult to do, and is not perhaps something, certainly from my view, certainly something that I was taught or thought, we should do when I was younger. It's always just present your best self. That's
exactly.
it. And then afterwards, oh, by the way, this is the side of me that I didn't tell you about.
Exactly. And I like what you said there about vulnerability, because I think, that needs to work both ways. We need to be open to the prospect that our partner is going to be so loving toward us that sometimes they may say or do things that feel painful or shocking or wounding to us, and actually have the courage to sit and listen to it and not kind of, drop off in a tantrum or act out or imagine the relationship is over or say, how dare you. There's something about really sitting and listening and being with some of those things, because I think it's in those moments that actually the connection deepens and deepens. So, that's my sense of things.
Yeah. What would you advise someone, or what would you say to someone who perhaps is listening to what we're saying, sounds good, but they're not used to operating this way? What steps could they take to be more vulnerable, to be more open, to start serving either their current partner or in terms of finding someone new?
Well, I think the first thing is really just to allow that what we're talking about here is a little bit unconventional. It's quite unorthodox. It's not what people get taught about romantic relationships at all. But for me, that's okay. I think there's something about just allowing oneself to be open to the possibility that, the way we get taught is not necessarily the way that it's actually going to work for you. And I think in terms of kind of opening oneself to being vulnerable, start small, start in baby steps, really. Try to give feedback on something that's a little bit mundane before you kind of actually say something that's kind of life-threatening, or, it's just kind of like experiment, test it out.
Yeah, I love that, because you're right, there are no, well, not that I found, there's no step-by-step guide, and every relationship is different. Every person is different. I guess I found for me that you're right, it's about taking a step and perhaps sharing something that is a little bit vulnerable, that you could get shot down for. But I found over the years that the more vulnerable I am, the more open I am, the better connection I have with people. And at first, they kind of look at me like, "Wow, you're quite an open person," and I say, "Yeah." "Oh, well, I'm not very open." Okay, but slowly, I, and this doesn't just apply to romantic relationships, but certainly I found, just friends telling me stuff over the years of, "Oh wow, I've never told anyone that before," or "How did you do that?" And I don't do anything, but I found that just by being quite open and being vulnerable through practice, that's happened. And there's always more to go.
Absolutely.
And I'm finding in literally the last couple of weeks that there's another level of openness and vulnerability I could still go to. And this is not a one-off, it's an ever-evolving deepening. if that makes any classical sense.
No, perfectly. I think being prepared to take risks on one's own behalf and on behalf of the other person is important too. And sometimes just, you know, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on the interview, but, you know, just actually shutting the fuck up and listening from time to time is all that's needed too, you know. Just be present, just practice being quiet.
Yeah, that's another great point. For me, what I found is that if I'm really annoyed, pissed off, upset, angry, you know, in any kind of relationship, whether it's with a colleague at work, whether it's my family, a friend, or anyone, that's normally the time where I need to slow down, need to be quiet, need to reflect. And, you know, there've been times where I've just thought, right, you know what, right now I'm not in a great headspace.
Yeah.
And let me just sleep on it. And I've slept on it. And I'll wake up in the morning. And it's amazing how sometimes just a good night's sleep can just give us a totally different view of the same person, the same situation. And in fact, like you say, this is very unorthodox and unconventional, but if I can't see the good in someone, if I can't see, you know, where they're coming from, if I'm really thinking they're acting out of order and I'm not happy about it, I know that there's something in that for me to learn, there's something for me to slow down. And if anything, of all of the things I've learned, that's probably been the most powerful and actually the biggest thing that's changed my relationships. Yeah. I don't know if that's been the same for you, or your thoughts on that.
I think this is a really good point. I mean, it does actually bring in our kind of mutual understanding about the three principles and the role of thought in the whole equation, you know, because I think in relationship we sometimes can get so in our heads about something that's going on, maybe something that the other person did, something that they said, something that they didn't do, whatever it is, you know, we can all sometimes get really worked up about it and then start inventing stories about what is actually going on. And the danger is that we then begin acting from the place of our stories and not from what has originally actually been said, or what's inverted commas true in the situation. And sometimes actually disengaging, stepping away, or as you say, you know, sleeping it, you know, just thinking, sleeping on it, just having a good night's sleep and seeing it from the perspective of the next morning can just, you know, dispel a lot of that kind of mythology that we've created for ourselves.
Yeah. I'm aware we've mentioned the three principles a couple of times and not explained them. I think just briefly for those people listening, I won't cover them in a huge amount of detail, but the basis of the three principles that Christine is mentioning are the three principles of mind, thought and consciousness, and were originally introduced by a gentleman called Sydney Banks. And the real powerful thing about the principles for me, especially with regards to relationships, is that we're always feeling our thinking moment to moment. And we're not feeling our circumstances, we're not feeling other people or their actions, we're feeling our thinking about the circumstances, the people, the
Yeah.
actions. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, or?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. I mean, it just expands kind of what we were talking about before. You know, we can make up the story that, you know, if we're feeling angry or pissed off or what have you, it's coming from our partner's actions, and actually it's coming from our own thinking, and sometimes therefore it's really useful simply to disengage and let things settle so that we can actually understand or see more clearly where our feelings are truly coming from, and not act them out inappropriately, you know.
Yeah. It's quite interesting to me that someone actually said to me that a number of so-called relationship experts that have written all the books and are on the shelves, and I won't name names because I don't know them, but a number of experts on who write books have often not got a great track record in their own relationships. And actually, funnily enough, there are a couple of relationship experts who have been divorced from each other and then gone on to write about how to have good marriages. And for me, what's been really quite interesting is people that I've met who have been teaching around the three principles as a modality, around whether they talk about relationships or not. They all tend to have fantastic relationships. I mean, people who met in their 20s, who are now in their 60s, who are just still madly in love with each other. And it's funny because it's so uncommon to see that. And before I just thought, well, that's not possible, or it's unlikely, and now how it kind of seems to be a theme with people who have been around this and taken this approach to relationships.
Wow, I hadn't spotted that before.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for today. But thank you for joining us on this initial call. If people want to get in contact with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
They could email me. So it's Christine at Livingstone, Livingston, consulting.co.uk.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to get in contact with me, you can do so. My website is ankushjane.co.uk, and there's a contact me link over there. You can find me on Facebook, which is probably where you've got this this interview from, and I'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Christine, and we'll speak to you guys, or I'll speak to you guys on the next audio session.
Thank you.